no? When we speak of the zone of proximal development, this is, to be more technical, we are referring to what we say the actual or the distance, no? The distance or the gap, no? Distance between the actual developmental level of the child as opposed to, as against his potential development level, no? Or in short, what we meant by the zone of proximal development is, I repeat, no? The zone of proximal development is the gap between what the child knows, the gap between what the child knows and what he does not know yet. He does not know yet. No? So here, if we take a look at this one, there is a gap, no? So here, there is no problem with this because the child already knows how to do certain things or certain tasks. He can do it independently, no? Independently. The problem is with respect to this, no? Those things or tasks or skills that the child does not know yet, no? So how is he going to know all those things? The answer would be through, I told you earlier, the answer would be through the more knowledgeable other. Through the more knowledgeable other. No, that is what the word of Vygotsky is. And when we talk of the more knowledgeable other, we are talking about parents. No, this is just a repetition of what I said earlier. And then teachers, any adults who is more knowledgeable adults, then even the peers, meaning barkada of the child. So these people will be the ones who will teach the child the things that he does not know yet. No? That's why in this case, if the ones who will be teaching the child of the things that he does not know yet, we call that the guided learning. No? Guided learning. No? For these people, in teachers, parents, adults, no? We call that guided learning. And for this one, for the peers, we call that collaborative learning. So, of course, Vygotsky is well known for those, no? For those types of learning. So Vygotsky's contribution would have something to do with imitation. Yung modeling na sinasabi natin, imitation. The child will just imitate or will just follow what is being modeled or what is being shown by the more knowledgeable other. Or this one, Vygotsky is also a contributor to what we call now the guided learning. No? Guided learning. And also, he is also the advocate of what we call collaborative learning. No? Collaborative learning. So if you ask me, what are the great contributions of Vygotsky? Well, these are the types, no? The types of learning that he has contributed in educational psychology and developmental psychology. But of course, as I told you earlier, Vygotsky's famous theory is the socio-cultural theory. No? The socio-cultural theory. Socio-cultural because he believes, no, Vygotsky believes that the social nature of learning, kaya yung ngayon, yung mga ginagawa today about yung online learning, the social nature of learning is a part, critical part of the process. No? Social nature meaning he interacts in society with other individuals, and that is very influential according to the Vygotsky. No? Also, aside from the social nature of learning, culture will play a part in the development of the human species. No? Culture. Okay? Clear? So we proceed now to the other psychologist, which is longer to discuss. And the next psychologist is an American psychologist by the name of Benjamin Samuel Bloom. No, Bloom. Ganda na, apelyido Bloom. And he is he was the one who formulated what we call the Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy of educational objectives. No? That is how he calls this framework. No? Or to make it clearer, when we refer to the taxonomy, we refer to the classification. No? Taxonomy will refer to classification. These are or otherwise known as the Bloom's taxonomy of cognitive skills. No? We focus on the cognitive aspect. Cognitive skills required for learning. These are skills that are required, no, for learning effectively. Okay, so we discuss now the Bloom's taxonomy of educational objectives, or what we call Bloom's taxonomy of cognitive skills required for learning. Okay, these are the same. Now, Bloom identifies 3 domains of learning. Now, si Bloom, Benjamin Bloom he has identified 3 domains of learning. No? I suppose that you have already read this because this is your assignment. No? Domains, meaning jurisdiction. No? When we speak of domains, jurisdiction, or the area itself. The first is what he calls the cognitive domain. No? Cognitive domain. And what happens in the cognitive domain? Of course, we are talking about the mental processes or the mind, as what I have discussed to you before. The mental processes or the mind. And when we talk of the cognitive domain, not domains, domain only, what is being learned here would be knowledge or information, no? Or info. Because you have to feed your mind, of course, with knowledge or information. You understand? Cognitive domain. So the second domain, of course, that's the mind. No? The second domain of learning is what he calls affective domain. No? Affective domain. And when he talks about affective domain, of course, this one is behavior-based. No? Second, behavior-based. No? Behavior-based. The first one is knowledge-based. No? This one is behavior-based. And when we talk of behavior-based, we are not talking about attitudes, No? We talk about attitudes, we talk about feelings, we talk about emotions. So these are within the coverage of what we call affective domain, no? Meaning feelings, no? Feelings, emotions, attitudes, no? That is the second domain. And then the third domain, according to Bloom, would be what the third domain for learning is what he calls the psychomotor. Psychomotor domain would be this time skill-based. No? This time skill-based or skills-based. Rather. When we talk of psychomotor domain, we are talking of the bodily movements. This time to acquire skills. Bodily movements, like say for instance, knowing how to use the computer because you are more of the body movements, or knowing how to use the hammer, something like that, or the piano. Those are psychomotor. No, you have to use your bodily movements. Okay? So these are the three domains of learning identified by Benjamin Bloom. But his framework focused more on the first domain, no? Focus more on the cognitive domain. Dito siya nag-focus, no, sa cognitive domain, not in the two other domains, no? So today, we will be discussing, of course, the cognitive domain as formulated or as experimented by Benjamin Bloom, no? So he calls that the taxonomy of cognitive skills or educational objectives. Pare-pareho yan ng kanya. Taxonomy of cognitive skills. No? So what are these skills that will require your mental exercise? No? So we have to mention them one by one. For the cognitive domain, no? Can I erase this, no? No? For the cognitive domain, cognitive. He classified them through a pyramid. No? Benjamin Bloom classified them. By the way, this taxonomy of cognitive skills was formulated in 1956. No? 1956. So you could just imagine it's already a long framework. So he classified them into 6. No? So 1, 2, 3. No? So it's like a pyramid according to order. No? This one, 1956, we have here first knowledge. No? Okay, it's the first one. Knowledge or information, the same. Then we have comprehension. Comprehension. No? And then we have here application. Application. Okay? So the first three bottom skills, he calls that the lower thinking skills. No? Lower thinking skills. So according to Bloom, you cannot proceed with the higher order thinking skills, lower order thinking skills. No? Lower order. So knowledge, comprehension, and application are lower order thinking skills. So we go up, it's now what we call the analysis. No? And then we go up further, he calls now the synthesis. No? And then the apex or the top, he calls that evaluation. But this one is in 1956 until the 1990s. These three at the top, he calls that the higher order thinking skills. Okay, so we have the lower order thinking skills. Now we have the higher order thinking skills. But this one, that was in 1956 up to 1990s, because this one was revised in the 1990s. No, instead of having these nouns, no, these abstract nouns, they this what we call Bloom's taxonomy, originally called the Bloom's taxonomy, it's now called the revised Bloom's taxonomy. That was in the 1990s. And where do we find the change? No, the change now in the 1990s, the change would now be, instead of using these abstract nouns, no, instead of using these abstract nouns, which he called knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, they reverted, or they coined it into verbs this time. No? So verbs, instead of nouns, these abstract nouns is now verbs. This one, knowledge, would be remembering. No? This is now the revised Bloom's taxonomy. It's now, knowledge should now be remembering. No? This one, comprehension, would now be understanding. No? Remembering, understanding. This one, of course, would be obviously applying. No? This one would now be analyzing. Now, because it's revised, I told you, this one is no longer there. No? It's now going up, because synthesis would now be up, creating. Now, it's now called creating. And then this one is evaluating. Like interchange lang, no? Evaluating. Because according to the revisions, you cannot synthesize, or you cannot create without evaluating first. So that is now the revised Bloom's taxonomy. No? There's a change between this and that. This one goes down, lower, evaluating is now here. The synthesis or synthesizing is now there, up, which is now called creating. Understand? So this is the cognitive domain. These are the skills that that are ought to be developed in the learning process. No, remembering, understanding, applying. Of course, these are the lower order thinking skills. Then we proceed with analyzing, evaluating, and then creating. Now, I do not know if you understand what is the meaning of these terms. No? Well, let's take them briefly, one by one. Let's take them briefly, one by one. Of course, knowledge or information would be remembering, right? If you remember, of course, remembering, you need to memorize. No? You need to memorize and then recall all the information that were taught to you. No? This one will involve memorization and then recall. Comprehension now would require the information and the knowledge that were imparted to you will now be arranged orderly, with order. No? No? That is how you comprehend. You have now to arrange the knowledge or the information that were taught to you in accordance with order. No? Application, of course, it will require the application of the knowledge or information to particular situations, particular situations. No? These are abstractions that you use in order to apply in particular situations. Now, for analysis, of course, for analysis, you have to break this down, no? Break this down, break down the concepts into portions or smaller units, no? You break that down in order for you to analyze. What are you going to analyze? Well, the cause or causes as well as the motivations, no? Motivations. And when you synthesize, it's the reverse, no? Synthesize, of course, would mean um, to get them together, no? Meaning, synthesize would be just like summarizing, no? You have to summarize and you have to condense the ideas, no? Synthesize. Condense the ideas. Condense meaning you have to bring them together into one idea, if that's possible. Then for evaluating, of course, for evaluation, what are you going to evaluate here? Well, this one will now require judgments. No? Judgments as to what? Well, as to internal criteria or external criteria. No? Here also, it will require judgment, so definitely you have to express something in your opinion, express in opinions, but the opinions will have to be judged according to internal criteria or external criteria. Understood? That's the Bloom's taxonomy of cognitive skills required for learning. Okay? So I think you need to read. You have to read more about these two psychologists because they have a great impact, no, in educational. Their theories have great impact in educational as well as developmental psychology. No? So your assignment would be to read something about constructivism. Okay, good afternoon and thank you everyone.